The second factor that starts the beginning of the Renaissance are changes in religion. And we're going to talk about two changes today. One is something that's called the Great Schism. It's sometimes also called the Papal Schism, where three separate popes claim to be the rightful pope. And we're also going to talk about a man known as St. Francis of Assisi. So if we start with the Great Schism, unless you had a particularly religious upbringing, you may not have heard of this before. This is a significant event in the history of the Catholic Church, but it's not often taught in mainstream history. And this is an event that starts with the 1305 election of a French pope, and he moves the papal court from Rome to the city of Avignon in the south of France. It's right there on the map. And this creates conflict between the Pope in France and the cardinals and other church officials in Rome, who feel like the Pope has always lived in Rome, and Rome is the rightful head of the Catholic Church. Additionally, the Pope was the head of a country we call the Papal States at this time, and he was the head of government. Now, we might not think it's a big deal to have the head of government be in a different country, but remember this is the early 1300s, so it takes a significant amount of time for any kind of message or decision to travel back and forth between Italy and France. So this conflict results in the election of two separate popes in 1378. These two factions finally decide they can't agree anymore, and a man named Clement VII is elected in France, and Urban VI is elected in Rome. Now this might not seem like a big deal, because, okay, there's two popes. You just pick which one you think is the real pope, and follow him, right? However, this is a problem. Who is the head of the Catholic Church? Who is in charge of the Papal States? Who should you listen to? And it's difficult to know. In 1407, in an attempt to resolve this crisis, the cardinals meet and elect a third new pope, a man named Alexander V. And finally, in 1415, all three popes disappear off the scene for some reason. Alexander V's successor was deposed, the Roman pope resigned, and the pope in Avignon was dismissed. It takes until 1417 for a new pope, Martin V, to be elected. He moves the papal court back to Rome and reunites the church. However, this has lasting effects. There has been a split in power at the highest levels of the Catholic Church. And the Pope has shown himself not to be infallible. Remember, this whole thing actually starts in 1305. There's only multiple popes from 1378 to 1417, but there's more than 100 years of conflict between France and Italy. And the end result is that this weakens the power of the Catholic Church in Europe. We won't see the final results of this for about 100 years, but almost exactly 100 years later, in 1517, Martin Luther will nail his 95 Theses to the door of a church in Germany and begin the Protestant Reformation. And that is, in part, caused by this schism and this weakening of power in the Catholic Church. In our next video, we're going to talk about St. Francis of Assisi and how he also changed religion in the early Renaissance period.